Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your hosts for today are Brian Fox and myself, Carol Tallon. Due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions, we are still recording remotely, so apologies for any poor sound quality. First up, Bryan interviewed Councillor Denis O'Callaghan, Labour representative for Killiney, Shankill, about a proposed new development.
It's just been announced that a board panel has given the green light for development plan in the Shankill area. Both the Dunleary-Rathdown County Council and the Land Development Agency have welcomed the decision from the board and plan to start construction on the site early next year, pending a decision from local councillors. On the line now is Labour Councillor Denis O'Callaghan, who represents the Shankill-Killiney area on Dunleary-Rathdown County Council. Denis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, do you welcome the decision, Denis?
I do, yes. It's probably long overdue. There's a shortage of housing in the Dunleary-Rathdown area for social housing. We have a crisis in our housing lists. We have homelessness, and we have an affordability issue right across the county. So in that context, yes, I welcome the decision yesterday by An Bord Pleanála to grant permission for the 597 housing units on the old juvenile detention centre lands in Shankill.
And how many of those then will be social housing?
There will be 200 social housing units, there will be 306 cost rental units, and there will be 91 affordable purchase units in the overall project, which will be a phased project. And it's hoping to start the social housing units in the initial phase.
And when then, when will this be discussed then at council level?
Well, the next step now is that the Director of Housing will bring a further report to the elected representatives. We won't be meeting now until September, but hopefully we will have a report at our council meeting in September, where the Director will be outlining the next steps to be taken by the Land Development Agency in the project. I suspect that they will now go to procurement and move the thing along as quickly as is possible.
I did say a final decision is pending from local councillors. Do you expect local councillors to give the go-ahead?
I'm optimistic enough. Now, there were concerns around the project when the Land Development Agency came on board, and in fact in April 2019 the elected councillors rejected the transfer of land at that time to the LDA because we didn't have enough information in relation to the cost rental proposals, which were quite vague.
You've got some reservations, don't you, about the LDA, the Land Development Agency?
I have reservations, but I can be convinced on it. I'm very conscious of the need for affordable houses to be built. I'm very conscious of the need for social houses to be built. The cost rental element of it is based on what is called the Vienna model, and Dunleary-Rathdown, as I understand it, is being piloted for cost rental development. We have another scheme which has commenced up in the Sandyford area, and my understanding is that the lands at Dundrum, the former Dundrum Central Mental Hospital, the Land Development Agency will also be involved in the development.
If you could just explain to listeners the Vienna model.
The Vienna model is where the cost of there's a wider range. The difficulty I have in relation to the Vienna model that there is a broader range of units available at reasonable cost to tenants. Here in Ireland, that isn't the case. The issue in Ireland is affordability. For example, on the Shanganagh lands, a two-bed unit at cost rental will be in the region of 1,500 per month. Now, that to me is not affordable. In the Vienna model, you can get a one or two bed unit for under €1,000 a month. There is a broader variety of cost rental. The cost rental model is based on the savings that will be made in relation to the land, and the development agency will be able to pass that on to the occupant in the form of cheaper rent.
Okay. So your own reservations then, I'm sorry, there was sort of conflict, if my memory serves me right, in relation to the Land Development Agency getting involved in this some months back. Am I right about that?
Well, the Land Development Agency came on board at a later stage. Yes, you're correct. The initial idea was that the council themselves would directly build out the site. That's not going to happen. The Land Development Agency are going to be involved, and I think we have to work to that criteria now and make the best deal possible for, especially in the area of affordability. Now, it remains to be seen how affordable the affordable purchase dwellings will be, the 91 dwellings. The last government produced an affordable scheme but never implemented it. So we're in limbo with that one. We don't know what the present government will do. Their section in the programme for government in relation to delivering social housing is vague enough. That may well be firmed up on, but it appears to me to be more of the same with this government as with the last government. Again, they talk about affordability and
Dennis, you're hitting some of the keys on your phone, so just because it's coming through so just to get back to the plans for Shankill for the moment, we get back to the government in a moment. When do you expect construction to begin then?
Well, the sooner the better, quite frankly. It's long overdue. I would hope that by early next year that there would be the first phase of that project would commence. Certainly the first quarter of next year, I would hope to see boots on the ground on that site. It's long overdue, and we can't afford long delays where we have people waiting on housing.
So you don't expect then to you expect the decisions made by the councillors and government to be more or less finished by the end of the year then, and machinery and cutting sod early next year?
I would hope so. I mean, I'm hoping that a report will come to us in September. There will be an issue around. My understanding is that we will have to dispose of some of the land to the LDA in the form of what's called a Section 183. That's a reserved function of the elected councillors to do. I would hope that will be done, and we get on with the work.
Yeah. Okay. Just, you referred there to the new government. We have a coalition government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens, with Minister for Housing now, Darragh O'Brien. What are your own thoughts now in relation to this changeover?
Oh, well, look, I'm prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt. We need a government. We were nearly 6 months without a government, which wasn't helpful at all. Now that there is a government in place, it's only right to give them an opportunity to get on with things and to legislate. I'm disappointed on the section of the programme for government in relation to housing. While they talk about bold actions on housing, a lot of it is aspirational, and there's no firm commitment as to how they will tackle the affordability issue, because in the Dublin and Greater Dublin area, the issue is affordability, and my priority is for local people here in Shankill who have had to move out to Wicklow and to Meath and to Kildare to be able to afford dwellings in their own county, rear their children in their own county, and hopefully, I'm hopeful that this project will commence that process of getting our young people back to their own county.
Well, the Minister seems to be in favour of the LDA because he says they have a crucially important and increasing role in the delivery of more affordable homes. As such, the programme for government commits to establishing the LDA on a statutory basis as a matter of urgency. Of course, that hasn't been done yet.
That's correct. The LDA was set up back in September 2018, and last year the Land Development Agency Bill came to the Oireachtas in order to establish the LDA on what would be a primary legislative footing. That hasn't happened to date. The Minister has said that he intends to urgently progress that to put them on a firm statutory footing, and I welcome that. It would appear again from the section on the programme for government that he will be empowering the local development agency to play a leading role along with the 31 local authorities in providing social and affordable housing into the future. That would be my understanding of it.
So you give me the impression that you're reasonably and prepared to give the Minister time to get things moving in his department.
Yes. In fairness, look, I mean, it would be reasonable. They're only in office a short while, but having said that, he needs to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Or if not, he will be held to account for his actions. But hopefully, I'm hopeful that the government will push and make social housing and affordable housing a priority and get houses built.
OK, Denis, we'll leave it there for now. That was Labour Councillor Denis O'Callaghan, who represents the Killiney Shankill area on Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council.
Thank you to Bryan Fox and Councillor Denis O'Callaghan, the Labour representative for Killiney Shankill in Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown, for that. We need to take a quick break now. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. I'm delighted to be joined now on the phone by John Power, Managing Director at SGL Corporate Finance. John, thank you for being with us today. How are you keeping?
Good, Carol. Thanks for having me on again. Good to hear from you again.
Great. Well, the last time you joined us in studio, obviously the world has changed a lot, and it's changed in every spectrum. So I'm quite sure corporate finance is no different there. So look, you might just give us an overview maybe as to some of the stuff you and your colleagues have been dealing with in the past kind of 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, so SGL is a small corporate finance consultancy, but we tend to specialise in the SME sector. We specialise in terms of providing outsourced CFO services, corporate finance support, and general project finance. So we sit on a number of panels and government agencies. We'd be a primary panelist with Enterprise Ireland on their finance pillar. We do a lot of commercial evaluations on a number of the supports and funding structures that are offered through those agencies. So we've gotten a very, very clear insight into what a lot of the issues are for particularly that SME sector. Which is so important to the Irish economy, and within that sector is you have many construction companies and ancillary companies to the construction sector as well. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of insight in there as well.
Right, and look, let's kind of get specific on this. What are you seeing right now? Like, what have been the biggest changes maybe over the past 3 months?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, I think the state has done a superb job in the speed that it acted in terms of, if we move away from the health space, first of all, lots of challenges in terms of health space, and people have had lots of their own challenges there. But if we move on to the economy, I think the government really acted really swiftly. The challenge now is that things like the pandemic unemployment support and, more importantly, the temporary wage supplement have pretty much delayed some of the challenges that are coming down the line. So we've done numerous engagements with companies, and nearly them all are not under severe cash flow difficulties from, if we say, April to July.
But is that kind of because they're being supported by the state?
Yes, absolutely. It has disguised a lot of the issues that we believe are coming down the line. So if we look at the companies we've dealt with, we're looking at cash flow difficulties beginning to hit those companies in Q4 and Q1 of 2021. And that's to a T, to nearly every company we've dealt with. That's where we're seeing the peak cash requirements for companies is in that Q1 space next year. So the temporary wage supplement has been brilliant. It has taken a lot of the cash flow pressure away from companies, but it's still there. We need a rebounding economy, and if we get it, it will serve to support some of those difficulties that are coming down the line. But we need if we don't get a recovery, we need a big stimulus. And I heard this morning that the European the heads of the European countries are on their fourth day of negotiation, hoping to sign off on a $7 billion package for Ireland. So, I mean, that's so required. The funding supports that are available to companies in Ireland are really, really strong, but they're probably going to evolve over the next 6 months, I would imagine.
Okay, when you talk about something as widespread across so many, across every sector of every industry, a big stimulus plan spread widely, is that really going to be the most helpful? Should we not have a situation where we prioritise certain industries or?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's like, here's the reality, Carol. I mean, COVID-19 has probably only severely impacted 20% of the economy in terms of from a sector point of view. Food is still performing very well. Construction is beginning to get back on its feet. But the sectors that it has hit are the most visible. They're the most optically visible sectors in our economy: hotels, hospitality, restaurant, bars, tourism. They're very visible. So it makes it feel as if this has been probably more impactful than it in reality it is. But if we look at across sectors, we're looking at about 20-25% of the economy being severely impacted, and they're the sectors that absolutely need support, particularly hospitality and tourism. They've been decimated this year.
Yeah. You see, they would seem to me like, I know retail has been lumped in there as one of the casualties as well. However, what I see is retail that failed to respond to trends that were already in play over the last number of years. They're the elements that have been really badly impacted. So for me, I think that there's been a blurring of lines between cause and effect. So the effects have been worse, but I don't know if some of the biggest impacts have been caused by COVID-19. I think they've maybe just been accelerated or been amplified by it. So that's where I see one of the huge distinctions between, say, the likes of retail and the likes of tourism.
Yeah, retail is an interesting case study in that retail has probably rebounded and is probably up in terms of year to date. I've heard some retailers saying that they're up 30-40% year to date. So really? They've responded. Yeah, retail has. There's been a massive pent up demand because people were not spending on what they would normally spend on during the months of March, April, May, and even into June. So there was a pent up retail demand, and a very much a support local and shop local mentality. Mm-hmm. So local retailers have probably seen a strong rebound. When you compare that to other sectors like retail, then you're hearing the big news stories about retail. For some retailers, it might have been an opportunity to restructure where they were possibly intending to anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that we should probably separate things like groceries and particularly local convenience stores, because we know that they've actually had a heyday during lockdown. It's been their best times. It's as actually one corner shop owner told me, it's been like Christmas week every week during the lockdown. So I think that they're almost a separate category when we're looking at retail. But in terms of, say, like looking at the likely impact this is going to have on commercial property, are we really looking at, I haven't heard those figures in terms of a retail rebound, particularly those who don't have an online offering, to complement it. Just before we came on air, you and I spoke very briefly about the commercial market, the commercial property market in Ireland. Do you really think that retail can actually come back from this stronger?
Can retail come back from this stronger? It will come back from this different, I would think.
Okay.
So retail, commercial space, we're going to come back from this. People are saying radically different. I think we may over-egg the pudding there, but I think we will come back from this a different economy and a different society and how we do things. Certainly, online retail has exploded. But again, you said it earlier, Carol. Those retailers that had an online offering have just maximized that. We've seen some, technology developments that will help smaller retailers come out, and that's been welcome, and that will continue to evolve. But retail, look, there's always going to be a requirement for retail, and the hardwares. If we come back to the commercial property and the property sector, but the hardware companies, without mentioning any names, but we all know the ones we're talking about, they've had quite a successful period as well. If we look at other sectors within there, paint manufacturers, you cannot get paint onto the shelves fast enough at the moment. There are sectors of the economy that are performing really well.
Yeah. And actually, by the way, I think it might be helpful for our audience here to just put your insights now into perspective or into some context here. So SGL, you might just, I know you've explained this to us before on the show, but you might just, for the benefit of new members of our audience, just explain the work that SGL Corporate Finance, what the work is.
So what we do is we primarily will support the SME sector. But an awful lot of the work we do is on behalf of many of the state agencies, where we will undertake, project finance pieces where we will support companies in constructing a credible business plan that's supported by a very much so tried and tested financial plan that backs up what their business plan is saying. That's a heavy part of what we do. We provide outsourced chief financial officer services to many of those companies. We also are the commercial assessors for many of the state funding supports that are out there, many of which are coming via Enterprise Ireland. So we'll do a lot of the commercial assessments on those on behalf of Enterprise Ireland. And then we sit on the primary panel that's in there within the finance pillar of Enterprise Ireland supports. So we cover a wide variety of bases within the SME funding and finance landscape.
Okay, and because you're looking at businesses from across a wide range of sectors and industries, which is important for context here. So when you talk about this problem that we're effectively rolling down to, Q1 next year, what can we do about that? And is this something that we need to target on an industry-specific basis?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the problems I see coming down the line, Carol, are surrounding, number one, cash and working capital. So, and I'll put this into real context in terms of examples. So you have a lot of companies there who had a very, very strong 2019. And on the basis of that, we're gearing up for a very strong 2020 legitimately. So a lot of money would have went into whether it was expansion, premises improvement, or even stock. So you have a lot of companies that would have purchased advanced stock, and now all of their working capital is now stuck within their stock element that they cannot liquidate. It's stuck in stock. So in terms of their physical cash, they're holding on to much less cash. Now they're burning cash in the intervening period. The temporary wage supplement has slowed that cash burn, but they are still burning cash. So when we get to the end of this year, as I say, Q4 and Q1, that cash problem is going to manifest itself. That combined with cash hoarding of companies, where companies are not paying their creditors. Okay, so you have lots of small companies who are struggling to get paid, and as a result are reluctant to pay somebody else. So you've got an almost a blockage in the flow of capital that's moving around the SME sector. So those two factors are pushing the problem further and further down the line to Q4 and Q1, and that's where it's going to manifest itself, where companies are going to need liquidity to unblock that blockage that's in the system. And that's where I see the liquidity requirement, particularly if it's targeted on a sector by sector basis. I think that's where the real assistance is going to be.
Yeah, and look, again, at the top of the show, you spoke about, perhaps the state intervention by way of a stimulus plan that's needed, but that should surely be the almost the plan B or the fallback option. Like, what should businesses be doing now, or what's within their control right now?
So, and I know we're going to move on to this, but our funding partners in the economy have a big role to play here. So there's a lot of stimulus out there at the moment. So we have the SBCI has brought out its range of products, including the Future Growth Loan Scheme, the COVID-19 Working Capital Scheme. You have Microfinance Ireland, who've just, I think they've announced a new round of funding. You have Enterprise Ireland with their Sustaining Enterprise Fund, and also the Micro Sustaining Enterprise Fund for loans of up to, or advances of up to 50k. There's a load of supports out there, but you've got to go and get them now, because don't wait for this problem to come at you, because if you're strong now in terms of liquidity and you've done a cash flow forecast, and it looks like you could get into some difficulty in maybe early part of 2021 or the latter part of this year, go now and secure the funding that you're forecasting that you're going to need. So whatever that peak cash requirement is, go now and start looking for it, because it will take time.
Okay, do we know yet, in terms of the unemployment rates that spiked and then we've seen them coming down sharply, do we know where they're likely to sit for 2020?
I think, this is only my own opinion, I think numbers were spoken about of 8-9%, even up to 10% unemployment by year end. You got to remember, Carol, that the reason a company could avail of the temporary wage supplement was to retain staff. Mm-hmm. So, but we are seeing within business plans that are coming in, companies are forecasting redundancies towards the latter end of the year. They are forecasting that as part of their plan.
You see, all these things are interconnected. One of the topics that we've been talking about quite a bit since the shutdown, or over the past few months here, is the mortgage side, because we've had people across all levels of the mortgage chain with mortgages in process to various extents, and the outlook now is going to directly impact on people's ability to be able to avail of approval and principles that they had, or to proceed where they were prior to drawdown, but also as to how they'll make a future application over the next 12 months. All of this, we don't know how this is going to impact the mortgage market. So I know, again, that's something you and I discussed before we came on air. So look, tell me how you're seeing things in the marketplace at the moment.
Okay, so in a context, I'm managing director of SGL, but I'm also managing director of Sanford Advisors, which is a regulated entity, and I have a team in there who are on the mortgage side as well, and commercial lending. So in terms of I think the residential property market has been quite robust in how it's handled this. Demand is still, there's a pent-up demand for housing, and that hasn't gone away. So you still have that, that mid-market demand for your family home. There's a pent-up demand there as well. So that's why the residential property market has been resilient through all this. The difficulty I have, Carol, is that many of the lenders that are out there are speaking, I won't say what I'm really thinking, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Okay? So you have, from a top level, you have many of the banks and lenders saying, you know what, we're open for business. We are lending. We will not take into account the fact that somebody is on the temporary wage supplement. You can have your mortgage. There's no problem. In reality, it's the complete opposite. If you're on the temporary wage supplement, many of the lenders that are out there will not advance even to loan offer, let alone drawdown. They want proof that you are no longer on the temporary wage supplement, or the company that you're working for is no longer claiming the temporary wage supplement for you.
And John, look, what you're saying is what we've been hearing anecdotally, and yet when we speak to the banks, they are telling us something different.
Well, Carol, I'll go beyond anecdotally. I have evidence, because we have responses and we have conditions, black and white.
So how is that manifesting? So, I mean, is it in the conditions? What do employees or their employers need to do?
What most of the banks will require is they will require two primary things. So a mortgage is all about two things. It's all about your salary and your capacity to repay. Okay, so you have to demonstrate your capacity to repay a mortgage, and then also you have to show tenure within your employment. So what a lender will do prior to drawdown or loan offer is they will request two things from you. They'll request your bank statements, and they'll request your most recent payslip. Okay, on payslips, the temporary wage supplement appears. It has to, because it's sent off to revenue, comes back, goes in via the payroll system, and comes out as the temporary wage supplement. That's why most people find that they might be even slightly better off under the current regime, because they're paying a lot less tax. So the lender will look for that. Okay, once they see that the temporary wage supplement is there, they will turn around and say, we can't advance you the mortgage until we have evidence that you're no longer on the temporary wage supplement. Now, that could be, if most people are paid at the end of the month, and let's say it's July now, it could be the end of September before you can demonstrate that evidence.
That's so frustrating for buyers right now.
Well, even worse than that, Carol, is you could have people who have particularly an AIP, but particularly an exception on an AIP. They have their property, they have their exception, and they just cannot close. It is the most frustrating, and we have a number of clients in that scenario.
Yeah, and actually we've gotten a couple of inquiries from people in that position. So they've signed their contracts, they've signed their mortgage paperwork, so they were maybe within days or within a week of drawdown, and Carol, their circumstances changed.
I've had a bank manager tell me that his bank is telling people through their communication channels one thing, and he's saying to me, I can tell you that we're not doing that. I won't say who or what bank or whatever, but he was adamant saying, people are coming in here telling me, oh, I heard you're doing X, Y, and Z. And he's saying it's the opposite.
So what's the legal position here then? I know that's an unfair question to ask you, but, is it a case that we're likely, in much the same way as the banks have been retrospectively trying to deal with their handling of the tracker situation, is it a situation that buyers are not going to be able to proceed and potentially run into contract issues because they've already signed their contracts to purchase a property if they're held accountable?
Well, the only thing is that the contract usually will have the mortgage clause in it, where if for some reason they cannot draw down on their mortgage, it voids the contract. So I don't think there's going to be contract issues as such.
But are there likely to be loss of opportunity issues for people who can't proceed now, and then it's found in 12 months' time or 3 years' time that they ought to have been allowed? Because there's going to be opportunity losses from the marketplace and on a particular deal that was struck.
I've got that. It's a hypothetical question. It's something that will only be answered, I think, in the fullness of time. But my concern at the moment, and my concern for our clients in particular, is that this process is so frustrating, not only from their point of view, from their solicitor's point of view, from our point of view, because they're being told something by the lender and we're telling them the opposite. So
yeah, like all of the commentary coming out, and again, we've spoken to most of the main lenders at this stage, and they are coming forward with certainly solutions or solution-driven approaches here. But if that's not translating into the marketplace, and we just don't know that yet, and we probably won't know it for a period of months. I appreciate that we're into a kind of a whole other realm of issues there, and again, it's going to take a few months till we know what they are. John, before we let you go, you might just really give some guidance to any business owners who are listening in now. Again, our audience tends to be across the planning, construction, property and PropTech sectors. But, for business owners now, what can they be doing to safeguard themselves as best as possible over the next 6 to 9 months?
Well, what I would say to everybody is if you haven't done it, and no matter how complex or simple you want to make it, please do some sort of cash flow forecast for your business over the next 9 months. Okay, don't go beyond that because it's impossible to forecast really beyond that. But for the next 9 months, understand how much cash your business is going to require. There's a complacency that may be there, particularly on smaller businesses, where the temporary wage supplement may be disguising what the true issues coming down the line may be. If you were to discard that temporary wage supplement at the end of August, where would your business be at the end of December? And plan for that. If it requires some additional funding, go for it now, because my fear is that you will. We have Brexit coming down the line as well, Carol. So we haven't even spoken about that, and that's at the year end. That seems such a small problem now, doesn't it?
It's all relative.
Yeah. So you have that coming down the line. You're going to have a lot of companies looking for funding, looking for the supports, looking for the stimulus that is coming out. Get your house in order today in terms of the documentation, the forecasts, the cash flows that every bank is going to ask you for. Every bank is going to ask you for a 3-year financial forecast for your business. Get that in order now.
Okay, John, great advice there, not just for our listeners, but for ourselves as well. It's always the case, get your own house in order first. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sure our audience will too. That was John Power, Managing Director of SGL Corporate Finance. We need to take another quick break and we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. I'm now joined over the phone by Niall Newman of KSN Construction Consultants. Niall, thank you so much for joining me today.
That's no problem, Carol.
So, Niall, first of all, a little bit just to introduce KSN Construction Consultants to anybody who might not be familiar with them. How long has the company been established?
The company was established in 1990, so we're in business about 30 years at this stage. So we're primarily a quantity surveying cost consultancy operation, but we also subsequently set up some time ago a project management company, and we also do a lot of work in the energy area for Sustainable Energy Ireland. So the main company was set up in 1990. I was one of the founding directors with David Kerrigan and John Shannon, and they've now left and departed and retired. So I'm the remaining founding director at this stage. So we have about 70 or 80 quantity surveying people. We've about 40 to 50 project management people, and we've about 40 people in the energy department.
Very good. So you've got a nice broad overview of maybe how the impact of the pandemic has been across the sectors in the construction industry. So what kind of projects are you involved in right now?
All sorts of projects, but primarily our core activity is mostly large-scale office developments and large-scale residential developments. We do work for the Department of Education as well, and sort of primary care units and so on. But primarily the big projects we're involved with would be large-scale office developments and residential developments.
Okay, so did you have any essential works that had to continue during the shutdown?
We did. We actually got involved out in City West where they had a step-down facility that was sort of emergency works where the Department of Health, I think, took space out there from the hotel and used it as a sort of a step-down facility for, when they had to, if and when they had to move people out of hospitals to free up bed spaces in the core hospitals. So we were involved in that project, and that was obviously an essential service.
Okay, that was actually I remember reading about that. That was a rapid build or rapid delivery project.
Yes.
So was that actually traditional build or modular?
I think it was sort of a modular setup. It was just bed spaces like you've probably seen in the UK where they set up effectively dormitories and whatnot. I wasn't overly involved in it myself, but it was a sort of a modular rapid build sort of a thing, you know.
Okay, and so like given the scale and the size of the company there and the number of people on your team, you know, how did the pandemic impact on your own business?
Well, obviously, we actually closed the doors of the offices in advance of Leo Varadkar's sort of closure date. What I think was the 27th of March. So we took the opportunity to send people home a number of days before that because I think people were getting uncomfortable and there was a lot of uncertainty from a health and safety point of view. So we closed the office and we invested in IT and so on, more IT, so we could all work remotely. So effectively, everybody left the office, we closed down and we all went home and worked remotely, which actually worked quite successfully during, let's say, the lockdown period and that, you know. We were lucky compared to other businesses and industries where we could do a lot of work remotely, and it worked quite well, doing meetings on Microsoft Teams and Zoom calls and all the rest of it. And that's still continuing at this stage. At the moment, some of us are back in the office. So we're working on a sort of a tag team arrangement where some people come in one week, other teams come in the other week and so on, just to make sure we have all the health and safety protocols in place, you know, and the distancing, etc., etc.
Okay, but you didn't have that in place prior to the pandemic?
No, so we effectively just closed the office, and now when we came back after the shutdown, we brought in a health and safety consultants, and they told us what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We've hand sanitizers and temperature controls and all the usual stuff. So like everywhere else, you know. So and then the high risk people were sent home, and they're still at home because if they've diabetes or something like that, or their wife or partner might be in the medical business in the front line, you know.
Okay, and now one of the very strong themes that we've seen was that while activity might have stopped on site for a period of months, it didn't slow down, I suppose, the business development work, the tendering or retendering, adjusting plans, things like that. So in terms of capacity, were all of your team still working at full capacity during the shutdown?
Yeah, very much so. So, like, it was effectively, as you know, a 7-week shutdown. So it was an opportunity for design teams, architects, engineers, clients, etc., to catch up, for want of a better word, on paperwork and optioneering and final accounts and variations and processing various different elements. So, you know, coordination of mechanical and electrical installations and so on. So typically on a project, we would have site meetings, as you can imagine, on a fortnightly basis, and maybe design team meetings on the opposite week. So all of those meetings continued remotely. And we found on most projects that we caught up on all the paperwork and so on with the contractors and subcontractors and so on. So it was full on, to be honest, you know.
Yeah, what did you think of the latest figures where it's suggesting that Ireland might actually be the worst impacted of all the construction industries across the EU, that in terms of productivity losses arising from the pandemic, Ireland might actually be one of the worst impacted, you know, with productivity losses for 2020 projected to be somewhere between 30 and 40%. Does that tally with what you're experiencing on the ground?
No. Our experience, obviously there was the 7-week lockdown and so on. What happened then in our experience was that sites recommenced, and in certain cases there was, Eastern European workers in certain trades that were maybe critical to the critical path of the project, and they were slow to get back to site. So obviously week one after the lockdown, it wasn't 100% productivity or 100% manpower on the site, but speaking to some of the larger contractors, certainly they were up to 90% within a week or two. So and it does depend on the particular site. Obviously, if you're in a big open basement or building a runway in Dublin Airport or something, it's a very an easier site to manage from a protocols point of view, because it's unlike, for example, a fit out of an office where everyone's in an enclosed space and there's lots and lots of contractors trying to do work on top of each other in a very, claustrophobic sort of situation, and it's very hard to manage from a health and safety protocol point of view. Whereas if you have, say, a large basement, for argument's sake, people are out in the open air and it's much more manageable, and I think the productivity is better. So a lot of our projects at the moment are outside. They're projects coming out of the ground as it so happens, so there's less challenge. So productivity is better, So,
yeah, that's interesting though, because again, with this phased, I think the industry was preparing through the CIF and other bodies. The industry was preparing for, kind of a slower phased return to activity, and yet what we've seen is that there was such a major push to try regain momentum on sites, whether that was incorporating kind of a redesign or incorporating an offsite or modular element, or whether it was just working in two shifts, because obviously the construction hours, discretion around construction hours allowed people to do that. So it's really heartening actually to hear that, on larger sites, they're getting back to kind of 90% capacity, but is that reflective of the majority of sites, do you think?
Certainly, in our experience, I mean, there's sort of a twofold situation. It's the productivity on site at the moment, and then there's other projects. We've had experience where other projects are now shelved because of the COVID thing, and that's a combination of, particularly some retail projects we have are now stopped, or maybe a couple of hotel projects, and it's probably like our expectation is that it's, a funding issue and a nervousness around funding. Obviously, without funding, you can't get a project off the ground with the best will in the world. So funding is on certain projects is maybe stopped or slowed down. So I think it's a funding nervousness, which we probably had a bit of that around Brexit. Now we have some of that around COVID-19 as well, But obviously, yeah. We have lots of projects where they are funded, they have a tenant, they are let, they're banked. So it's business as usual to get on with the job and get the jobs built and get the offices, complete and occupied, etc. So we're lucky that we have quite a number of larger projects that are of that ilk, and they will just now continue. Obviously, there will be a delay at the back end of certain projects where, the 7-week delay and maybe a little bit of delay before the 7 weeks, a little bit of delay after the 7 weeks will manifest itself. And there's obviously going to be a negotiation around all of that as well.
Okay, well, there's a couple of different things there. There's a couple of different issues arising from that. So first of all, on projects that are stalled, are they likely to be stalled temporarily, or do you think that it's a case of going back to the drawing board and making a development decision as to whether they proceed?
One project in particular, it's probably stalled because of their cost and their design, as well as much as the COVID impact. Other projects we have that's a sort of a retail type project. Other smaller retail projects we have look as if they're just stalled at the moment because of the COVID-19 thing,
Okay, are we in danger of making long-term decisions based on a very short-term situation?
I'd say it's a wait and see situation. Like that's the decision of those developers at the moment, this week, last week, next month. I'd say it's, people need to see how this COVID business unwinds. At the moment, there's more uncertainty than anyone would like because of what we're experiencing. I think, rightly or wrongly, everyone thought we'd be well through the process at this stage, and that's now not the case. So the nervousness continues.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Our previous guest just reminded us that while we're caught up trying to tackle the uncertainty caused by the pandemic, that actually we still have Brexit looming at the end of the year, that we still don't know what the likely impact of that is going to be. So I suppose back to the things that maybe we have greater sight of in terms of the office blocks that you're working on at the moment. are you seeing an element of redesign being incorporated there as a result of the COVID-19 safety measures, including social distancing?
No, not really. No, I mean, what you can see, it's not so much the office block itself, but maybe the layout and the set out of the people within that, e.g. the fit out of the office block. We're looking at situations where people are remodelling layouts and so on to give more social distancing in the medium term. We have a project, for example, where there's a temporary fit out where people are going to decant out of an existing office temporarily, where they alter and extend and revamp their existing office. It's a large project, and they have to move into temporary accommodation, and that temporary accommodation could fit previously, say, 200 people. Now with the new distancing, it only fits 100 people or 120 people. So in that situation, the planning layout of the office is being completely remodelled for a better fit because of what we have in front of us.
Yeah, and that's something that we're seeing. We're seeing across the board now when we speak to fit out company or to office occupiers. One of the other things you touched on there, which it almost feels a little bit early to discuss, but I'm interested to hear what kind of experiences you're seeing on the ground in terms of contract renegotiations, because obviously there have been changes, there's been productivity losses, there's been changes to the delivery program and to the project build times and costs. Do we know how that's working out so far in terms of contract disputes?
Yeah, it's very, very varied. Some people are quite willing to work with us on it and our clients in that regard. Other people are a bit more aggressive. Not too many, but some people have been quite aggressive with claims and so on. So we see it as sort of a twofold situation. The initial 7 weeks of lockdown, so that's a very defined period where you can get in under the bonnet with the contractors and try and agree, let's call it the standing cost that may or may not arise depending on the contract. And that, again, depends on whether it's a public or a private contract. Every contract is pretty well different these days. And then there's let's call it the protocols beyond the 7 week lockdown for every project to put in place now for the social distancing, etc., from, let's say, the 18th of May when we went back to work to the end of the project. So it's a sort of a twofold situation. So like we've agreed in certain contracts the amount of money that we've mutually agreed with some contractors, the amount of money for the 7 weeks on some jobs. On other jobs, we're in negotiations, let's say, in that regard, and we haven't concluded them. And we're now seeing the claims for the balance of the project as well. So that they're now coming onto our desk for negotiation and agreement, So we're starting visibility on all of that. And it does vary a lot from project to project. Again, it depends, to exaggerate, if you were fitting out a basement nightclub in Temple Bar for 14 weeks, it's a very difficult thing to sort of manage from a distancing point of view compared to a civil engineering project like a road or something, So every job is different and there isn't one size fits all or anything.
Yeah, and I would imagine actually the attitude of the parties plays a big part, and also the flexibility that they have within the bounds of their own funding and their own timelines.
Yes.
But do we know yet? Because obviously we're at the stage now where we're still looking to find mutual agreement where there's disagreement, and then likely mediation. But in terms of legal advices, do we know? Is there any legal certainty around the contract position here?
Yeah, but we have legal advice. I can just pick a contract without naming it, where it's a specific contract, so it's not. It's an amended RII contract, for argument's sake. So we've very clear advice from the legal people as to what, out of that 7 weeks, how many weeks the entitlement will run for, and on what basis it should be calculated, for want of a better word, So we have good legal advice on that, but beyond the 18th of May, the jury's out a little bit on the entitlements and so on, But I think contractors effectively understand and know, if you have a project, let's say it's 100 million, that there is funding in place for that project to the tune of 100 million. There isn't a limitless fund for the COVID problem. So I think contractors, in my view, are of the understanding, as design teams possibly are, and clients, that everybody has to share a bit of pain in this. It isn't a one-way street, and there isn't sort of an unlimited fund to fund all of this. So I think it's important that contractors mitigate their costs as best they can and come to the table with plausible proposals, etc., that are manageable and can be negotiated and agreed, rather than longer, wider, bigger claims.
Yeah, that sounds infinitely sensible. And obviously you would hope that people will be, but that might not be the case, and they might not even be in a position to be. So actually, I am, and as I said before, I even brought up this point, it's really early days for this, but actually it would be great maybe if we could have a chat again in a few months' time to see how that's rolling out.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, it's early days, but it's such an important one. I think it's going to have a huge impact on output and delivery performance as we go into 2021. But we'll leave it there for now. That was Niall Newman of KSN Construction Consultants. My thanks again for joining us today. That's it from us today on Property Matters. Thank you for listening in. You can get in touch with the show on Twitter at iPropertyRadio, or you can email us at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Also, my thanks to Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Talon of Hear Me Roar Media. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Talon, and all the team here, stay safe.